Hello, we're going to do a quick cumulative sum chart today. And the data set that I'm using is one that we created in a prior video in this series. So if you want to follow along with the same data set, I'll put the link in the video description. So typical use for cumulative sum charts is to compare things like actual cost versus budget or versus an estimate, even something like a burnup chart in Scrum where you're showing progress over time. The idea here being you can see where things started to get out of control, where the costs passed a certain estimate. You can select it in the chart, see what happened, see what was going on. And in this case, I have a constant line thrown in at the end of the chart to show how far we are into the project schedule too, because that's relevant. Cumulative totals have been historically pretty tricky to do in Power BI, meaning if you went to do one for the first time and you'd never done it before, you probably had to do an internet search to figure out how to do it, unless you were a DAX ninja. But there's a new feature now, not so new anymore probably, called visual calculations. And visual calculations make it a lot easier to do this sort of thing. So that's what we're going to go through today. Let's get started. So there's kind of two parts to this process. There's getting your chart to show the running total, and there's getting the line to do what you want with that running total. So for example, I'm using task data here with a completed date column for the date axis. What happens when you do that is if you have an already completed project, then your lines make sense. If you select something that's in progress, your lines stop where your completed dates stop because your tasks that are in progress or not started don't have a completed date yet. So if we want this line to continue all the way across the chart to the end date, there's some tricks that we can do for that, and I'll be showing you that. So for example, this one, the line goes all the way to the end, but the actuals stop at the actual date because that's what's actually happened. So let's do the running totals first. I'm going to add a line chart to my page. It doesn't have to be a line chart. You could use a bar chart too if you wanted to. I just feel like this conveys what I'm trying to convey in a better way. And then you add whatever measures you want to add to your visual. So for me, that's my columns for estimated effort and actual effort. You can use the auto-summarized columns. So like this one here would work. You can also use explicit measures if you want to. And then add the date field that you want to use to your visual. I'm going to start with completed date, and then we're going to swap to something else later. So here's the default behavior of the line charts. It's going to group up your data by your date period that's shown. This is not a cumulative chart yet. In order to make it one, what we can do, there's two ways to get there. We can either use this ellipses menu, new visual calculation, or it's also in the modeling tab of the ribbon when you have the visual selected. This one here, new visual calculation. I'm going to do custom just so that I start with blank, but you can also select one of the presets if there's one that you want to use. So the way that the visual calculations work is that they only interact with things that are actually in the visual. What that means is if you're used to writing your own DAX, is you can't actually access every single thing in your model. If you want to use it, you have to put it in the visual somewhere. We'll get to why this is important later. We're going to start typing whatever we want our measure to be called, equals, and then running sum, and then look for the measures that you dropped into the visual. So that's our sum of estimated effort hours. Close the parentheses and hit the check mark. That added a line for us for our estimated up here. What you can do after you add that visual calculation is hide the original. So I'm going to hide the sum of estimated and sum of actual. So there's our running total. I'm going to add one more for the actuals. If I just click into this box, it'll let me create a new one. We're going to call this actual. That's going to be running sum actual effort hours. Close the parentheses, hit the checkbox. A couple of points while we're in here. If you want to edit these at any point, you just click on it in the fields well over here. There's a couple optional parameters for the running sum. If I back this up a little bit, I can see the parameters in here. So you can specify access blanks and reset. So reset is going to be the one that resets it over a specific period. So you'll see this a lot in financial data. So typically people want something to reset by fiscal year. So you drop your fiscal year into one of the wells for the visual so that you can reference it. If you're not setting the axis or blanks, you can just do commas with nothing between them here. And then for the last one, reset, you would put your year in here, whatever your year column name is, and then close your parentheses, and that'll make it reset over fiscal years. For me, I don't need it to reset, so I'm just going to close that. And then if we want this to be a little bit easier to understand, I usually like to make my estimated kind of a dotted, more insubstantial looking line than the actuals. So that's under the format your visual lines and then select the series. So estimated line style dotted. So right now this is summing hours. If I wanted to make this a cost comparison for labor, I could multiply this by something like the average hourly rate for people working on this project. So I could do times 50, and then we can display that as a dollar amount. So if I commit this, my other line looks weird now because I haven't done the same thing to the other one. So let me change that one too real quick. You can do this one times 50 also. All right, so format your visual. If I search for the word format in here, we have a grouping for data format. So we can select each of these series and choose how we want them to be formatted. So since this is cost, I can format it as a currency or our actuals currency. And then I'm going to give this chart a more specific title because estimated and actual is not descriptive. So we're going to say labor cost by completed date. All right, so now we have estimated and actual labor cost by completed date. If I click on back to report, I can swap these out to see the different values. If I want something that indicates the potential end date of the project, I can go to this little magnifying chart icon in the top right corner and add a x-axis constant line. I'm gonna add a line, so I'm gonna make a new measure. So we're gonna call this max due date, and the value for that is just gonna be max of the due date field. I already have a measure with that name. So now for our value, we can select our max due date and click OK. This FX button is a little bit of a misnomer. It says conditional formatting, and you can put conditional formatting on it, but you can also use this to put measures in here as a value. So now you can see more clearly that this project is not actually completed yet. However, we still want our estimate line to go all the way to the end. To do that, we need to make sure that the axis that it's using has a date for all of the tasks that we want to display. So that means we kind of need a new date column to use. You can use Power Query to do this, or you can use DAX. Technically better practice probably to do it in Power Query. So I'm going to go to transform data, and I'm going to go to the add a column in the ribbon, and we're going to add a custom column here. This one is going to be called combined date. You can call it whatever you want, but I think I already have one with this name, so I'm make it something longer. And what we're going to do is make an if statement here. So we're going to say if status, that's our status field, is equal to complete, then use the completed date. So double click on completed date there. Else use the due date. So the due date is kind of like the expected date. Obviously this requires you to be entering due dates for your tasks. If you don't have due dates for every task, then use something else. But that's all we need to do other than setting the data type. So by default, these custom columns in Power Query are untyped. So you can see the ABC123 here. We need to make sure that it is interpreted as a date. So I'm going to go to the data type up here and set it to date, and then close and apply. All right, all 38 rows of my data are loaded. Now we can just swap out the date used here. There's another step after that, so bear with me. We're going to take out our completed date and add in combined date. And it looks like I have the automatic hierarchy on. That's what this year, quarter, month, day is all about. You can leave this on if you want to, or if you want to turn it off, you just click the caret and then click on the name of your date field. Now what's going on is our actual line is flat for anything that hasn't been completed, which I don't really like. I would prefer it to be blank for things that haven't happened yet because I feel like it's easier to interpret that way. So if we want to change this behavior, we need to have something in here that can tell us whether or not a task is completed. The visual calculation doesn't have access to the whole model, so we need to stick a field in here that it can use to differentiate those. So I'm going to put in the completed date. So if I drop the completed date anywhere in here, we'll be able to use it. So I'm going to put it in the tooltips, but you could put it wherever you like. It's going to default to try and summarize it to earliest, and that's actually fine here. But then if we go and edit our actuals line, we can put an if statement here. So we can say if the completed dates equals blank. So if it doesn't have completed date, then comma, return blank. And then another comma, otherwise return the running sum calculation, and close our parentheses there. You could format this to be easier to read. Now, if I click the checkbox for this, you can see that it's returning blank for these last two tasks because those are incomplete. If I come back to the chart, now it works the way that we expected it to. So for projects that aren't complete, it's not showing actuals as a line all the way across the visual. There might be a more elegant way to do this. So if you have brilliant ideas about how to make the line behave in the visual calculations, I'd love to hear about it. But this is the first thing that my mind leapt to when I was looking at this. So as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.